Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 3 Maddening builds that I'm using. Today, we're discussing 2 of my personal favorite characters in Fire Emblem Engage with some new coats of paint that I'm quite happy with, as well as an underdog who has never really been used before in my content or in my personal time playing, but who secured himself a very nice, if rather niche, position on the team. So let's talk about all 3 of these today, coming right up. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and if you know me, you know the channel, you know that YouTube is my full-time career, and I need your help to continue to grow the channel and, well, find success in the screaming maelstrom that is YouTube. So if you could leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, if you find my content fun, if you enjoy Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy, or anything else that I've covered, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Today, we're starting off with the best boy, the former Brave King, Boucheron. And while he's not the Brave King today, he is still fulfilling a very important role on the team. This is a general Boucheron build, and this is actually something that if you're familiar with my Fire Emblem Engage content, you might have seen for a very short amount of time, or at least you saw an Axe Knight Boucheron, in my very first run of the game on hard mode back on release. This is something that I had tried after I switched Boucheron out of Axe Fighter in an attempt to find a more useful niche for him before he swiftly got benched for a while, before I then brought him back and created the very first iteration of the Brave King. So it's kind of an important milestone in Boucheron's journey on my content and on my streams. This isn't just an excuse for me to use a character that I do enjoy so much. Boucheron is, of course, one of my faves, but there is actually something here, I promise, and we're going to go through what exactly that is. First off, as always, let's talk about our growths. As a general, Boucheron actually has a pretty nice array of stats that are part of the reason that I think he can serve well in this role. So let's see what we've got going on here. At HP, we've got 110, very nice, very meaty. 40% strength, not the best, but serviceable enough for a tanky role. 0 magic, which is literally irrelevant, doesn't matter. 60 dex, pretty nice, good accuracy for with axes, very nice. 45 speed, 65 defense, quite serviceable. 20 res, 15 luck, and 30 build. And these stats are quite clearly reflected in Boucheron's current stats. Even before we calculate in Emblem buffs, we have a nice 51 HP, 19 strength, 20 dex, 12 speed, understandable, we are a general, 26 defense, 8 res, and 12 luck, which rounds out to a pretty solid array of stats for an internal level 22 unit. And this is part of the reason that I feel like General Boucheron works, because I'm trying to work around that now infamous issue with Maddening mode in Engage, where your uber efficient tanks, such as, say, Louis, become too good for their own good if you use them in their intended role. Their defense gets so high that they literally can't tank anymore because enemies won't even try to attack them, making it so that you can't weaken them, you can't soften them up, you don't effectively block by making the enemy stop to attack you. They'll just part around you like the Red Sea and go after your squishy units in the back line. So if you want to have a tank, which I do think is still an important role to have in Maddening mode, you just need to kind of walk that tightrope. You want to have a unit who has decent... So you want to have a unit that can kind of have a decent array of growths defensively and offensively, but isn't too powerful defensively, so that the general's growths can put them in a point where they're tanky enough without being too strong. And I think Boucheron falls into that category. I mean, you look what we have going on here. Boucheron is well known for having incredible HP growth, something that you obviously want if you're going to be taking a lot of hits, if you're going to be standing on the front line. You got to have HP lest you fold to that one big attack that gets through. You want to have decent enough strength so that you're at least dealing damage on the crackback. We're not worried about securing KOs or 1 rounds or anything here with Boucheron, or any tank, really. Just want to be able to make sure we're softening the enemy up so that our other units can come in and deal with them. Want to make sure you have the dexterity to hit reliably. If you're only going to get 1 hit in, you want it to land. Speed, I mean, having a speedy general for what they can be, is fun. General Kagetsu was great in my previous run because he was actually able to compete with speed, but it's not a requirement. It's not a huge deal here. And again, 26 defense, 29 when we calculate in Ike, who we'll talk about in a second. Pretty damn good for this point in the game. You're going to take enough damage to be targeted, but not so much damage that you're liable to go down to anything other than like the most focused of assaults. So pretty nice all around. And of course we have quite poor res, fairly standard Armor Knight general things, and then very middle of the road luck. Not a huge deal. I mean, again, we're taking hits regardless. We're not really going to be avoiding anything, no matter how high our luck is. So not bad, not bad. As far as items are concerned, we have the following. The Noah Turn for just all-around moment-to-moment usage. Tomahawk for range. The Steel Great Axe +3 for when we really do need Boucheron to be able to get that big hit in. And, I mean, this will hit hard. This will get the job done, don't you worry. And then a Hammer +3 for efficient dueling against enemy generals and Great Knights, because having effective weapons in Maddening is very important, as those enemies that you need effective damage against will be plentiful. And having that damage bonus is truly, truly massive. As far as our skills are concerned, we of course have Boucheron's moved to tiers. Not nearly as helpful here as in something like the Brave King build, but having just an extra couple of damage here and there from backup attacks getting thrown around when you don't have the highest strength to begin with, certainly not something I'm going to complain about. A skill that gives damage for essentially free for doing something that you want to be doing anyway for extra damage, like chain attacks, is really good. And way better than a lot of the other personal skills out there, like someone who we'll be talking about later on this list, hint, hint, Fogato. So yeah, I'm happy to have it. Always good. Makes for a very strong unit. Swap is fine. It's a utility piece, but not anything that I'm building any strategies around. But when you need to be able to use your general to get a fragile unit out of the way and you can swap them, I mean, hey, it's nice to have, right? Then we have Axe Power 3 at this current juncture, hopefully getting up to 5, to help bolster that middle-of-the-road strength that Boucheron has as a general, be able to push a little bit more damage out there. And, I mean, again, we're an armored unit. We're a general. We're not planning to avoid hits, so the -10 avoid from having Axe Power is a non-issue. I'll take my free damage, thank you very much. And finally, the classic pair-up, because, I mean, hey, if you're going to be having a frontline unit, you want to make sure that they're not going to be getting ganged up on by the myriad swarms of later game Maddening mode and all the backup units it likes to throw at you, because 1 or 2 backup attacks you can handle. Once you start getting like 3 or 4 ticks of like 5-6 damage per backup attack, you're going to fold real fast. So having pair up to prevent that without needing to have Corrin on your tank, always a good choice. And then of course we have the standard array of Ike abilities, which like, he's Ike. But yeah, I really like General Boucheron. We are about 2/3 of the way through the game at this point in this run that I'm doing off camera, and he's been solid the entire way through. He takes enough damage that he gets targeted, but not really so much that he's liable to go down unless I really leave him in a vulnerable position, in which case that's my fault. And then he does have Resolve from Ike, so he can toughen up when he needs to and the chips are really down. So I really like this build. I think it's another shoe-in for a solid Boucheron build. Not his best build by any means. I think that's still a title held by Brave King, but it's a good option. And if you're trying to figure out how to have a frontline actual tank, not dodge tank, and you want to be able to get around the issues with Maddening targeting, then I think Boucheron is a decent enough choice. So I highly recommend checking it out and seeing what you think for yourself. Moving on to Jade. Jade is another one of my personal favorites in the game. Kind of ironically, both her and Boucheron, very slept-on characters by the Fire Emblem community writ large, but characters who have a lot of hidden potential that makes them just as good as, if not better than, in my opinion, some of the fan favorites out there. Now, Jade is absolutely a unit that if you're using her as an Armor Knight or as a General, I personally think you're doing it wrong, because she really wants to have some magical capability. She's got a very nice magic growth for an armor unit, doesn't have really anything holding her back in terms of using magical capabilities, and that's something that we've seen in my Sage Jade build that I used extensively in my previous Maddening run. It was one of my best builds in that run. I still need to do a full video about that because I truly, truly love that build and think it's phenomenal. But one of the things that people talked about with me as I was discussing Sage Jade and we were building on it and elaborating on it and everything, there was a lot of suggestion that I use Mage Knight to get use out of her decent strength growth and kind of have a mixed type of physical magical attacker spell sword type of thing going on. So I figured now would be the perfect time to try it. And while it's not working in the way that I think people were hoping it would when they gave me the suggestion, it is working out. We're going to talk about why. So first of all, of course, growths. We have 60 HP, 40 strength, 50 magic, that very important 50% that I always like to try and hit on Maddening, especially for our offensive stats. 35 dex, which is not the best, but Jade has pretty decent base dex. Mage Knight has pretty decent base dex, so it's not a huge hit. 35 speed, which again, not great, but it's workable between emblem buffs and skills that we have available to us. It's actually not as bad as you might think. 50 defense and 55 res, actually a surprising amount of bulkiness for a Mage Knight. I'm quite pleased with that, and she has to grow into it a little bit. Her defense still isn't great, but it's good to know that that capability is there. And then 25 luck and 10 build. So the idea here, we're not going to be running out into the middle of the enemy pack, dodging everything, doubling things. This is not a front runner lone wolf slayer like my Wyvern Knight Lapis build is, right? But it's actually pretty strong. We're rocking mainly the Levin sword here. Mine is currently +3. I also have a silver sword and L Surge for niche scenarios that we'll talk about in a second. But our primary weapon is the Levin sword. This way we can attack both in melee and at range. We can use our superior magic stat to do so, and we can tap into some different capabilities with it as a result. People were suggesting that I should maybe go axes with this build when it was first being discussed, but due to Jade's overall poor build, especially in Mage Knight, I didn't think that was a good decision, and going with swords allows us to use the Levin sword, which is pretty nice. Then, of course, we do have a silver sword for when we're maybe targeting enemies that have high res and we need to be able to deal more damage to them physically, which happens. It's not the most common thing, but it happens. And L Surge for when we really, truly, desperately need to be able to land a hit on a dodgy enemy, maybe someone in terrain or a Griffin Knight who's just a dodgy type of unit in general, that type of thing. This is a backup piece. Not super important, but it's here. For our skills, we of course have Jade's Meditation. Grants res +2 for 1 turn if you wait without taking an action. Just like with Sage Jade, this is a decent option for luring in enemy magic users and dueling with them 1-on-1 or 2-on-1. It can be the boost that you need to survive that enemy phase. Then we have Mage Knight's Chaos style. If unit initiates combat with a physical attack against a foe armed with magic or vice versa, grants speed +3 during combat. This is what I mentioned before about us having a couple of tricks in the bag to deal with our overall middle ground speed in this build. This is definitely going to be very, very useful, especially against our preferred target that we'll be talking about in a moment. Then I actually have Resolve. If unit's HP is 75% or less after combat, grants defense and res +5 as long as unit's HP stays below 75%. The idea here being that you can lure in enemy sages or like single target melee attackers, things like that, take a hit, and then have a nice boost to your defense and res to complement our decent growths in it, and become surprisingly tanky for a mage on a horse. It's worked out pretty well for me. Then I have magic and res +2. This is kind of a holdover until I decide on what I'd prefer to have on Jade. I'm thinking maybe Draconic Hex, but maybe a stat booster, maybe some speed. Hard to say, but right now just having the ability to have more speed, to have more resistance, so we're more adept at dealing with enemy magic users on the enemy phase, works for me. And this is a build that requires Crom. Or, well, I shouldn't say it requires it. You could definitely do it with other base game units as well and base game emblems. But I like Crom here for one particular reason, and that reason is other half. If unit initiates combat, Robin chain attacks, grants magic +10 while engaged. So now, instead of having a decent enough magic of 19, when engaged we have a whopping 29, which for this point in the game is pretty damn good. And it's going to allow us to deal with our primary target of Armor Knights, Generals, and Great Knights much, much more easily. You'd be very surprised how the speed boost from Chaos style combined with the damage boost from other half allows this Mage Knight Jade build to double and blow up even the tankiest frontline tanks. It's been extremely consistent and very, very nice. Combined with the fact that she can attack in melee and at range due to the Levin sword, and it makes this Jade very versatile. We of course do have things like surprise attack, allowing us to prevent opponents from countering, which helps with our middle-of-the-road speed if we're attacking from terrain, Rally Spectrum to boost our allies if it's not safe for us to attack, Brute Force for the occasional damage boost when we're critting, not that that's happening very often, but when it does, it's nice. And Gig 11 Sword is actually a decent enough option to use on a Mage Knight such as this. So overall, I've been quite happy with this build. I wouldn't say that it is something that comes above Sage Jade for me, but it's been effective, and I'm happy to field Jade on pretty much any mission, and she's been able to deal with it pretty adeptly. Overall, Mage Knights are kind of a weird class in Fire Emblem history. They've either been super busted back in the old days or reined in severely in the more modern day, and they can kind of have a hard time finding a place as a result, not being so powerful that they are a must-have, that you want everyone to be a Mage Knight, but as a result, not typically the first choice in most scenarios either. But I think due to her unique range of stats and growths, Jade can pull it off and is quite fun to use in this role. So if you're looking for something interesting to do with Jade, a way to maybe use her pretty decent magic growth, then Mage Knight might be the way to go. Also, if you have any suggestions on what you think I should slot in over Magic and Res +2, or even over Resolve, let me know. This is a type of build that can be very, very versatile in terms of what skills you assign to it, and I'm sure there's plenty of good options out there that you guys might be able to call out that I just haven't thought of or overlooked for one reason or another. So let me know. I like having those types of discussions with you guys. Finally, we're moving on from two characters that I have used quite frequently and who I definitely have a soft spot for, and talking about a character who's been a complete underdog and who has seen, frankly, almost no use either in my streamed runs of Engage or my personal runs that I've done off stream, and that is Fogato. Fogato is a character that I actually expected to like a lot more than I did. I'm a big fan of Bow Knights and kind of mounted cavalry with ranged stuff. I like Mage Knights for a reason. But Fogato was always disappointing to me, I think partially because I always had other archers already slotted in and ready to go. By the time he winds up joining the party, I like Etier, I like Allcrest. So it's kind of been awkward to try and fit him in with the generally limited deploy slots that Engage has. And it's certainly not helped by the fact that Fogato absolutely has one of the worst personal skills in the game with Charmer. During combat with a foe who is also unit's most recent opponent, inflicts crit -10 on that foe. Why is this on a character who is primarily using bows? Like, any self-respecting archer in most Fire Emblem games is going to be in one of two scenarios. I guess technically one of three, but they kind of fall into similar camps. The first scenario is that you are exclusively attacking units from range who cannot counterattack against you, meaning regardless of how many times your archer and that unit have fought, their crit doesn't matter because they can't target you, they can't attack you, so this does literally nothing. Or you're in a scenario where, like, you are attacking an enemy unit that can counter, but by the time Charmer is going to come into play, you're probably just finishing off the opponent anyway, so they're not going to have the chance to counterattack. It's really weird. Like, this should be on a tank, if anything. Like, Charmer should be on Jade or Louis or something, not Fogato. It makes sense for his character, not as a unit. So that definitely turned me off. But seeing as how it's kind of one of my goals with these Maddening runs that I'm not streaming to go through and use characters that I haven't really used before, I wanted to try and find something to do with Fogato. But since I didn't like his base class and the way it plays and his personal skill and everything, I decided to change it up. And that's how I found Warrior, which actually has a lot going for it. Let's talk about the stats really quick. Starting off, we have a very nice 85 HP. Always love to see it. 50 strength, hitting that mythical 50% that we always want to see on Maddening. Very, very nice. 25 magic, which is completely irrelevant here. It's not needed in the slightest. 40 dex, reasonable. Not great, not terrible. Enough for what we're looking for here, especially once we talk about our skills. Then, 70 speed. I did not realize how fast Fogato is. 55 base speed before you calculate in any sort of class bonuses. It's pretty insane. So 70 speed is phenomenal. A very respectable 40 defense and 40 res, 25 luck, and 15 build. Why is this the build that I chose to go with? Well, there's one enemy type or really 2 variations of the same enemy type, in Engage, that causes me agony like no other, and that is the Griffin Knight and the Wyvern Knight. There are so many of them, and they are so fast, and especially the Griffin Knights are so dodgy that they are 9 times out of 10, they are the wrench that gets thrown into whatever plan it is that I'm trying to enact. That's where Fogato comes in. Fogato might be a warrior, but Fogato very rarely has an axe in his hand. Instead, more often than not, he's equipped with his silver bow, and he's targeting whatever the nearest or most dangerous flying unit is. With Merciless, he's getting a 50% damage bonus against any foe that's been broken, which isn't too hard to do. Griffin Knights wield a wide array of weaponry, which means you typically are going to have someone who can wind up breaking them. Then we have Speed and Dex +2, and a Bow Focus 4 to make sure that we are as fast and as accurate as possible, so that no matter how dodgy one of these flyers is, Fogato can see them, Fogato can get a lock on them, and Fogato can launch an RPG-sized arrow straight down their gullet and keep them from harassing my units ever again. That's pretty much Fogato's sole purpose here. He's going to seek out and destroy flyers, and he does wonderfully doing so. Most recently, I did acquire Erica and a Frames Emblem ring, and I decided that there really wasn't anyone who'd be better for it than Fogato, because, again, he's getting an increase to his dex, he's getting an increase to luck, and due to Lunar Brace, he's getting even more damage equal to 20% of the foe's defense. So it really shouldn't be hard, even if he can't outspeed the enemy to double them, for him to one-shot, especially with this big silver bow, any nasty flyer that's menacing my line. Every once in a while, I'll have him attack something in melee with a silver axe, or if I'm really desperate, I can have him engage, use the rapier, once I have a high enough bond level, the Sieglind, to get some effective damage on a dangerous target that isn't a flyer. But the vast majority of the time, we are using the bonuses from Erica to guarantee that we can devastate an enemy flyer. Is it niche? Yes. Is it narrow? Yes. Is it effective? Absolutely. And when you have a unit whose whole purpose is taking out the most dangerous type of enemy unit that you're going to encounter in the highest difficulty mode in the game, I think that's a reasonable adjustment to make on your team. And that's not to say that he can't deal damage to other enemy units as well. He can. As a backup unit attacking with a bow, he's going to be able to contribute chip damage all over the place. And, like, he is a warrior. He's getting that damage bonus from Merciless. He's getting the damage bonus from Lunar Brace. If you need him to soften something up or finish something off on the front line so you can push up with your actual front, he can do that, and he'll do it with a smile. So, overall, I'm very, very happy with this Fogato build. Of all the different ways that I've tried him thus far, which haven't been that many, but I have tried to make him work, this is the build that absolutely feels like it's been the best. And I mean, hey, I'm just saying, I'm happy to have another member of the Abs Club who can join Jade on the top of the mountain of abular glory, right? We're an equal opportunity abs enjoyers community around here, and like, boy, my man is contributing. Look at him. You shred cheese on those things. It's insane. So, yeah, if you're looking for a build for Fogato that works out despite his personal skill being a complete dud and seemingly not having the most strength in the world, try out Warrior. I think it's a pretty good fit for him. Also, if you have any suggestions for anything that you would maybe slot in for his skills over Speed and Dex +2 or Bow Focus, probably not Bow Focus. I kind of really like having it there to make sure that he can hit stuff, but still, if you have any suggestions for that, do let me know. And if you have any suggestions for Jade or Boucheron as well, let me know that too, because, I mean, frankly, I've learned as much about Engage from you guys as y'all have learned from me. Some of my favorite builds, or at least aspects of some of my favorite builds, have come from you in the community, in the comments, in my Discord. So keep those suggestions coming for skills, for unit builds, and what have you. I would love to read it. I'd love to have a discussion with you guys because it makes these videos more fun. But with all that said, I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. This has been another episode of 3 maddening builds I'm using. There's still a bunch of stuff, both successful builds, weird builds, and maybe a first episode of failed maddening builds. There's been a couple duds in this run yet to come, and just plenty of other Fire Emblem and Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy stuff on the horizon, so look forward to that. But with that said, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I do very much appreciate it. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.